gonna show you how to do it so you can do it in the future. You know about the green lights. So look here, and then you go here. Sorry, Uncle Frank. Almost ready.
Oh, no problem. So the brother of yours that wears the glasses,
Yes.
he's older than you or younger than you?
Younger.
He's younger than you.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was older than you.
No, younger. He is a senior in high school.
You're already out of high school.
Yes.
Good. Oh.
I was just letting you know we're live now on camera.
Yeah.
Oh.
They can hear us.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. There's probably no one watching right now. It's just warming up.
That's our intro music.
Oh,
Yeah, we've been running now for like 2 years. So 2 years and kind of yeah, we see every Sunday. I think we did an episode and when we got back from Guam, and we were talking about like just the experience up there on Guam, and then we were talking about Auntie Zena, like kind of like yelling at you and getting mad at you. So I think you guys were there watching that one. So did you bring the mic a little closer to you? Good? Yeah, I think so. I think we're picking it up. Well, let us know if you guys can't hear us. But once again, what's up, everybody? We're back at the ParBar. It's a special edition today. I'm blessed to have a special guest with me today. You can see him. You can also see me. It's a one-on-one interview. And usually we don't do that, but today we are. So my name is Rich Dean, and I want to introduce to you the master of Chamorro dance, Mr. Uncle Frank Rabon, or Senor, right?
Doesn't matter.
He's out here from Guam. He's doing a unification. He's here to help unify the Chamorro community in a 65th Sons and Daughters Guam Club celebration, which has been here now for 65 years. And so this is the weekend where we're going to unify and have a celebration down here at the Sons and Daughters of Guam Club in San Diego. Uncle Frank, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on the show. Like I said before we got on the show, I haven't seen you in too many interviews. But I know you've had a couple. You are the master of Chamorro dance.
Yeah.
You've kind of started this movement back in, or you did start this movement, not kind of. You did start the movement. Give us a little history and background of the Chamorro dance and when you started it.
I began the movement in 1983, but just to give everybody a brief history of who we are. Our people began our civilization 4,000 years ago in the Mariana Islands. And in that time frame, we've gone through several colonization. The Spanish colonization began in 1668 with the arrival of the missionaries, although Magellan landed on our island in 1521. But the interaction between the galleons and the Chamorro people were very sparse. When the missionaries came in 1668, that began the more impacted aspect of our culture through colonization. One of those things that was greatly impacted was the Chamorro dance, most especially the indigenous form of dancing, celebrating, chanting, and singing. Now, one of the reasons for that is because of the religious aspect. Looking at dancing as a taboo in terms of celebrating. So the indigenous form of dancing for the Chamorro people of the Marianas was removed, eventually to the point where it wasn't practiced or it wasn't organized. And then when dancing finally came about after during the colonization, the people started to pick up the introduced form of dancing, such as the batsu, the Spanish waltz, the sotis, the punta tacon, the bailana iguas. These were all introduced Spanish dancing that was done, and not in an organized form, but where it was done during gatherings, social gatherings, fiestas, and these are things that were introduced by the Spanish colonizers. And then eventually, after 1898, when Spain seceded her territories to the United States, we encountered another form of colonization, which is the Americans. And in that form, the dancing again began to change, and that's when we started to learn things like cha-cha and jitterbug, the twist, and they were fat dances. They were not traditional dances as one would consider from an indigenous point of view. They were just dances that were done in social gatherings or in parties or whatever. And with that in mind, I, as a professional dancer, I began dancing in 1971. I was basically introduced to cultural dancing in the form of Hawaiian, Tahitian, Maori, Samoan, Fijian, these kind of dances. And we were one of the first local groups that broke into the Hilton Hotel and began a contractual form of presentation. But it was through that introduction that I began my search in 1971 to try and reestablish the indigenous form of dancing for the Chamorro people. It seemed like all the other Pacific Islanders were celebrating their indigenous dancing even to this time, despite colonization, but it wasn't the type of colonization that the Chamorros encountered in the 400 years that colonization existed in the islands. So I began my research, and I realized that a lot of the information or any form of documentation regarding our Chamorro dance, our indigenous Chamorro dance, was not written or documented by any of our visitors that came in, be it from the missionaries or be it from the galleons that passed through the islands on their way to the Philippines. Although they were practiced in forms of social gathering, that's the only time that you would see. Whereas when I traveled to the Pacific Islanders, I realized that organized dancing, organized indigenous dancing, was still very much vibrant in and amongst the islands of the Micronesians, the Melanesians, and the Polynesians. And not only throughout the Pacific Islands, but as I traveled through the Asian countries and interacted with the Native Americans over here in the United States and in South America, I realized that they also continued to practice their indigenous dancing as well as their traditional practices in dance, chant, and singing. And I started to wonder why that did not exist in our island. Yet, yes, there was dancing. I was part of learning the jitterbug and the cha-cha and the butsu and all that stuff. My elders were my grandmothers, for one. My aunts and uncles were very knowledgeable about those dances. And when we have fiestas or weddings or baptismal parties, they would get up and do those dances among themselves. So those dances were very vibrant, and I realized that's their knowledge. And as I tapped into their memories, their memories or their recollections would not go further back than 1898. Every time I asked them if there was any form of dancing that represents our people prior to the colonization, they would come up with they don't remember, they don't recall, and that they're more their memory recalls more of the adaptation, like I said, the butsu, the cha-cha, those kind of dances that were being performed. So researching and gathering, in 1983 when I organized Tautotano, Guma Tautotano. My main objective in doing that was to reestablish that aspect of our culture, that part of our culture that was lost for a while. And I had to do that through research and recreation and reconnection through migrations and things like that, in order for me to establish some form of representation of our people, that we existed prior to Magellan landing in 1521, prior to the missionaries coming in 1668, and prior to Spain seceding her territories to the United States in 1898. I wanted to at least create the awareness amongst our people that we really didn't sit around underneath the puga tree and chew puga all day. Otherwise, how would the laddie stones have been erected and still at this point very iconic for our people in the Mariana Islands? I could not sit and say that we didn't celebrate, we did not honor birth, we did not celebrate harvesting, and we did not celebrate our way of life. And it was through those incentives that allowed me to embark in this journey that I've been on for the past 35 years.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's just the background of kind of like where our people are. And really, if you guys didn't catch that, it's really just to establish that we're indigenous people.
Right.
Right. At the end of the day, it's that we're indigenous people. We were indigenous to our island.
Exactly.
I've also seen that on the DVD you guys had that came out. Was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago?
Which one? The Ukunmanay. What DVD are you?
Is it We Are I Am Chamorro?
Oh yes, the one that Polly Eric Forbes.
Yes.
Yes, created. Yes, yeah. Because he.
And so you guys had that one, and so that's a little bit of the background on the Chamorro dancing.
Right.
But that goes. I mean, it's not like you make it sound like it was an easy road that you kind of paved. Like I was like, oh, we said this and this is what happened.
Yeah.
You had to go through a lot of people resisting that.
Yes.
Yes. The colleges resisting that.
Yes.
Educational, the collegiate areas.
Yes.
Saying no,
Yes. Academia, even the elders. When I started to establish indigenous dances such as the Bailan Uritao, the Bailan Galaydi, the Bailan Linatla, the Bailan Fisga, the Bailan Panglo, all Bailan Gaputulu, the elders living in Guam, basically, and the Marianas, were resistant to seeing those kind of things because it was something very different from what they're used to. What they're used to seeing is we have to don on the mestiza, the lancero outfit, wear some of the American clothing in order for us to do the jitterbug. So that was what they considered Chamorro dance, or what they call mainstream Chamorro dance. But to them, anything that is not with mestiza is not Chamorro dance.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for you, like, what's that argument sound like? I guess back then, like, I'm not trying to establish that this is authentic. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we're indigenous people,
right.
And we definitely didn't dance like this.
Right. Yep.
And so you have to start establishing some kind of foundation, which you did. But how does that feel like, just that salmon going upriver, and just fighting the current?
Yes.
Was that really hard for you to do, or you were just?
It took a while, but I realized that educating our own people in the different the different generations, whether they be the elders or the middle generation or the young generation, education was the most important thing. One of the things that we encountered through colonization was that we were never taught the history of our people. We were educators that came to our island in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s after the war. They were more inclined to teaching us about the United States, the 50 states, the capital of the 50 states, the government of Guam, the presidents of the United States. Mm-hmm. So they were more inclined to teaching us more of the colonizers' history rather than our own history. It was not until the late Tom Pedro Sanchez who first wrote a book, the Guam, the history of Guam. That was the first introduction that I had in my younger years of any form of Chamorro education or any form of written Chamorro education that was written by a Chamorro person. So the education that occurred through our people did not discuss a lot about our history. So therefore, a lot of our people were more inclined not to understand our origins, mm-hmm. our way of life. I mean, they taught traditional practices. That has been vibrant such as the fishing, traditional practices of fishing, weaving, the suruhana. Those things continued to survive throughout the different colonization. And it continued to be passed on by the elders, okay? But when it came to dancing and chanting, the nasal chanting, it segued into the novenas. So if you listen to raw novenas that is being established in the villages through the traditional things, you're going to hear the nasal sounding and the chanting.
Right.
And a lot of those chanting, the melodic aspect of those chanting, stem from the indigenous aspect prior to colonization.
The Austronesian
Right. So
sound. Right.
hearing that and hearing those things, and then the comparison that I've had in my travels and the research, it basically made me realize that, okay, so we did chant it. We did
Right.
chant it. What the missionaries did was they picked up our chanting and incorporated the religious aspect of it.
Right.
Incorporated the novenas and the lisalsu and all that stuff. So the primary chanting was in existence then. So that already told me. And mind you, Richard, I'm like you mentioned earlier, I'm not authenticating. I cannot do that at this point
Right.
in time because there's a lot of things that were not written of our people
Right.
by the historians that traveled in. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to establish an awareness to the generations that exist on the Mariana Islands that our history is 4,000 years old.
Right.
Okay? And it did not begin when Magellan landed in 1521. It didn't begin when the missionaries came in from the Philippines in 1668. And it did not begin when Spain ceded her territories to the United States in 1898.
Right.
Our history and our way of life and our civilization began even before Christ.
Right.
And that's 2,000 years before Christ. Yeah.
And some of that, just to back that information up, is all done through research as far as like, what's the thing called? Excavating the land and finding
The archaeological.
Yeah.
The archaeological.
and that's like carbon dating.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That's what I'm assuming that's what they're using.
Yeah.
And so it's not like it's just made up out of thin air.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's there. It's facts.
Right.
And then also to go on some of the research. So you're researching through books through like Spain, because we can't find our history books on our island. So you're going to like Europe,
Right.
and you're looking in like the books of like the cathedral or something like that,
Right.
like the Catholic books.
When in my endeavors in researching, and I'm still doing it, I try to look in the museums or some of the places that I've been able to be very fortunate is in the archival collections of some of the missionaries that existed. I was able to extract some of that in Cebu. I realized that Manila wasn't the port city at the time that Magellan was circumnavigating the world. It was Cebu. Cebu was the port city, and San Vittori's missionary, the Pali San Vittori's came out of Cebu, not from Manila. Eventually, Manila became the port city as it is now. But Cebu was the prominent city at that point in time. So a lot of the archival collections occurred or are in that area. I was able to visit the University of San Carlos, which is the oldest university in the Philippines. I've also visited...
Which one is that? One more time,
the University of San Carlos. It's
Okay.
the oldest university in the Philippines. And then I've been able to, visit Cagayan de Oro and interact with some of the tribes that are there and observe the way they do their traditional practices, especially their dances.
Right.
But the biggest thing that I saw was when I was able to participate in the Austronesian Festival in 1999. I've been traveling under GVB to Taiwan previously, but in 1999 they began the Austronesian Festival. And the Austronesian Festival, their primary mission was to bring back the migrated tribes that ended up populating Southeast Asia the Pacific Islands as far down as Rapa Nui into Chile, and then also the Native Americans, and so when you're looking at language and you're connecting, you're going to hear the similarities in some of the language,
Right.
and you're also going to see some of the similarities in the traditional practices. So participating in the Austronesian Festival, I was able to see a lot of similarities, and that basically assisted me in trying to recreate some of the dances. But I've also recreated some of the dances based on experience. Like, for example, when I created the Bailan Galaide, I already knew, not even having to travel to the Austronesian, but just on our island, that we were a seafaring society. We were, just based on the historian's description of our Galaide and our Sakman, how they were so impressed with it. So that is something that existed already, and it's written in the manuscripts, in Ligovian's manuscript, in Pegafetta's manuscript, in Pali Samvitoris's manuscript. They're written there. So the seafaring, we are a formidable seafaring society. They were amazed as to the speed of our canoes. So I created a Bailan Galaide to represent that aspect of ours, of our people. When I created the Bailan Gapatulo, those are recollections of my two grandmothers. Back then, the Chamorro women rarely cut their hair. Their hair is always long. Nowadays, they have the styles, but back then. But I remember at that time in the 50s, shampoos were not readily available in the island of Guam. But what we had was the coconut oil, lananizug, and this fragrant lime called lalanga that they use for shampoo that would cleanse their hair. And I would watch them when they go to the river and they apply all these things. So I created that to represent that aspect of our way of life. I also created different types of fishing. The tekin, that's in Sulu, the talaza, those are different types of traditional practices, even the weaving. And then, of course, the Uritao, the Bailan Uritao, the Bailan Linala. The Bailan Linala, we were a matrilineal society prior to colonization. The women were honored in the villages because of their ability to carry life. And so it was believed by our people that from the heavens you are born and you come down to the earth, you live your life, and then when you pass on, you return back to the heavens, which completes the cycle of life. We are not the only ones that celebrate that aspect. A lot of indigenous cultures believe in that aspect of the circle of life. So that's where also creating the dances, there is a reason behind it. There's a reason why these dances were created, and there's a reason why they're representative of us. Okay. The Bailan Uritao is the tunas. It is not a warrior dance like a lot of people would kind of look at us. It is a dance that signifies the agility, the strength, and the coordination of the Uritao, which is the bachelor. And it also signifies the 8 counts that I utilize when they're working together. It signifies the building of the Guma Uritao. The Guma Uritao is the main house in the ancient villages, in the ancient society of the Chamorro people. Prior to all these cemented house and the roofing tint, we had Guma Uritao. And the Guma Uritao is the center of education, where the men will teach the upcoming bachelors the way of life in anything prior to moving out and starting a family within the villages. But the Guma Uritao is more like an educational house for everybody.
And there was one for the women, right, which is the Guma Lao.
Yes.
Yes. That's actually what we represented this year at PIFA, was the Guma Uritao and the Guma Lao. Right. Kind of passing on education. And what you've been doing. Back to the Austronesian Festival, which ended up being Festpac, correct?
No, the Austronesian Festival is separate from the Festival of the Pacific Arts.
Okay.
The Festival of Pacific Arts was established by the SPC, the Secretary of Pacific Communities, and they realized the Secretary of Pacific Communities, which is headquartered in Fiji, realized the erosion of the traditional practices, the language and culture of the various Pacific Islanders. So when they established the Festival of Pacific Arts, which began in 1972 and occurs every 4 years, traveling within the Pacific region, it was to create an awareness amongst the Pacific Islanders in the value of preserving, perpetuating, educating, and promoting the indigenous aspect of the Pacific Islanders. The Austronesian festival, which began in 1999.
And is that still around?
It took sabbatical for a while, but now it's brought back. It began back again in 2012.
Okay.
Okay, but so but in 1999 when it began, it went for about 4 or 5 years, and then due to funding, it kind of went to sleep. But their mission is that the 16 Austronesian tribes that still exist in Taiwan right now are the direct ancestors, the direct linkage that the Pacific Islanders, the Southeast Asians, the Native Americans have. And so their mission was to bring back those migrated tribes to celebrate their heritage, their traditional practices, their language, and everything.
And where's that held at?
That's always in Taiwan.
Taiwan?
Taiwan, yes.
It's funny because when you were saying something about the way we sing our novenas and things like that, you can hear. I actually looked up Austronesian chanting just for the sake of research.
The nasal sounding.
Yeah, and it sounds very similar.
Yeah.
It sounds very similar, and so I was like, wow, it does sound like our rosaries.
Yeah. And it's not just us. I mean, if you travel amongst the Pacific Islanders, if you take away the structured form of singing, that has been established, and you go into the core of the people, you're going to hear the nasal sound all the way through. Yeah.
Right. Except for there is, like you said, there's some of those places where it's been taken over, and their form of singing has been changed.
Yes.
Due to churches and Mormon
choirs and
right.
Structured. Yeah.
I want to move on kind of like into where you got you got the official title of Master of Chamorro Dance from the academia, which was I felt like it was and I just want to touch on this because when you actually went up there and you had like everything, and you got was it like an award, or was it like your
from the university?
Yeah,
that's my honorary doctorate degree.
Yeah. And I felt I was like I wonder how Uncle Frank feels about that. Like I wonder if he's just laughing inside, or if he's just gonna if you're gonna pull something off like funny. How did that feel though? How did that feel to actually achieve that?
Well, at first it was a humbling experience because to be honored by academia. And, academia in the beginning of my journey 35 years ago were very, resistant to what I was doing.
Right.
So to be able to be recognized by them tells me that they finally realized that I am worthy. I have a value as to what I've been doing.
Right.
I wasn't expecting it, and now that it's been given to me, I have a responsibility now to make sure that honor that's bestowed upon me will be carried, for the other generations.
Right.
Yeah.
Because not to talk too much about my personal dancing. People know that I teach Furry Rancho, but I was brought back in 2000 with Rose Matanonia from Imahen Tatatano. Yeah. She brought me to Guam, and that's where Festpac kind of changed my life. And you kind of knew that it would, and so you kind of allowed me to go out and venture off and be with other cultures, so I could see it, I experience it. I definitely came back with a different attitude about dance and culture. But moving forward, you now have established so many gumas. You see like the renaissance that's happening back at home, and you see like these other groups coming out and establishing themselves. They're no longer just on Guam. There's not only 3, there's not only 4, there's, I don't know, how many are there, 16, 12?
Oh, there's more than 20.
More than 20?
More than 20. If you count CNMI, you count Japan, you count the United States and Guam, there's more than 20.
Yeah. And so how does that feel? Like to see all the progress that, the one thing that you started was you wouldn't stop, regardless of who told you what, you said, you know what, I'm still going to do this for my people. I'm doing this for my people. It's not a personal thing. I'm not doing it for my person. We don't get paid here. Uncle Frank, no, he's been here for a long time. And he told me, like, if you're going to do this, understand you're not going to get paid for it.
You're not going to get rich.
Yeah.
That's a
You're not going to be rich,
You know.
rich with love and knowledge.
Yes.
But you're not going to make the big Lamborghini money.
Right. Or the bastard, yeah.
How does that feel, like, personally, now that you're there? You're at the, the height of where we are now.
Well, several things it comes to mind in that. First of all, it makes me I'm very humble to see all the seeds spreading, and at least in my heart I can safely say that when that aspect of our culture was removed, there was no hope of it coming back. Based on what was going on. When I took on the journey and the 35 years, now with all the gumas and all the practitioners that are happening, there's a guarantee that it's not going to die like it did in the past. So that aspect, that's one thing that that I realized through all this hard work, which to me is a lot. It's priceless. Okay, and then the mere fact that our young generation is starting to realize more of who they are as indigenous people and embracing it. That's another thing. Right. So all those aspects fall into play when I come around and I see all these guma organizing. And because in the guma, when you organize a guma, it's not just about dancing. You educate the individual in the holistic aspect of who they are as Chamorro people.
Yeah.
And that's why it's the language and culture. So the guma is kind of like it's like a traveling guma uritaw. It's basically what it is. It's not
a mobile home.
Right. It's not a stationary structure. It is moving. But within it, the knowledge is the same thing that was practiced and established when we first established our civilization 4,000 years ago. So, it's beautiful to see all of it. And for me, I as I look back, I'm in my senior years now, I can safely say that I did not let my people die in vain.
Right.
I always look at it as there's a lot of people before me, from Taga to Malagueña to Kapua to Godal, and also the elders, my grandmothers. They work as hard as they could to preserve whatever they could. It's up to us now, and I think I say for myself that I've done my part, and I hope that everybody else that's within this situation or the gumas will continue to do their part, because we're at a race that's not numbered in the millions. We're only numbered in the 1,000. And when we stop speaking our language, and when we stop speaking, doing our way of life, then we're just a statistic.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't want to be a statistic.
Yeah. I remember you said that last night. We do have a quick comment from one of the people watching. It's Ken AG. He said, so much knowledge. I remember talking to him on the porch, and the knowledge he would be so willing to share. And I'm not sure where he's from. It's not his full name, but I can attest to that, because but that's also within the other Fafanaguis that you have now established under the Master of Chamorro Dance, which is now you and Auntie Eileen Meno, who is also was one of your students.
Yes.
And so she's the second.
20 years.
Yeah. So she's the second that's recognized as the Master of Chamorro Dance.
Yes.
And how does that feel to have a second person where that was once your student, but kind of like now you're supposed to be sitting at an equal spot.
Yes.
How's that feel for?
It means that to me, it means that the legacy is there. The continuity of the practice that once was lost, which is dancing, is there. And therefore, with everybody, not just and so we are accomplishing what our indigenous people who landed in the Mariana Islands 4,000 years ago were doing what they were doing with the rites of passage, and people passionately dedicating their lives into becoming, because our people did that. Our people did that. And even throughout the colonization, our people continue to do that, maybe just in a subliminal way, but they continue to do it. They continue to maintain the traditional practices and using the rites of passage, just like any indigenous people of culture.
Right.
Yeah, they do rites of passage. You just don't become a master
belt.
carver, yeah, without going through years. Oh yeah, you got it because you look good. No, they dedicate their lives. They passionate, and so to see Eileen being recognized, I'm very honored. I'm not going to live in this world forever, so someone needs to step up.
And I think honestly, I think it's in great hands. Auntie Eileen. I got to dance next to her when I was 18, and her attitude is kind of the same as it was back then. And she's a hard ass, she isn't nice, but she's loving and caring about what you want to accomplish.
Right.
And she'll be there for you.
Yeah.
She's offered her hand out as much as anybody else that I saw back on Guam, the Fafanaguis who are under you now. And KNAG is Joaquin Uggan. He said he's from Talafofa.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's
say hello to him.
Yeah,
that's one of my students.
Well, you can say hello. Yeah. He's here. He's watching. But yeah, now how many Fafanaguis do you have currently under you?
Oh, quite. Right now there's about 14.
14.
And then there's the second in line, the apprenticeships that are moving into achieving that title in order for them to sit in the tribal council. Because when you achieve your title of Fafanagui, you automatically become part of the tribal council that governs the performing arts in the Chamorro people. Yeah. And the tribal council are representatives of Fafanaguis that are from CNMI and Guam. And also there's United States here. So, eventually, you, Richard, you're an instructor now. You're what you call going through the pains. It's not an easy journey.
Yeah, it's painful.
But eventually, depending on where your life takes you, when you achieve that moment, then you become part of that council that continues to to advise the others as well as keep them in the direction that this movement that we've put together. And a lot of the other disciplines like the carvers and the weavers are looking at trying to pattern their situation. See, all these things, I always tell people, I am not what you call that, I'm just reestablishing. I am not bringing back something that never existed. It existed, okay? It was removed for a while. Our way of life went through a lot of genocide. So I'm just bringing back things that exist, okay, and trying to balance it with the modern world that we have now, which is technology. So, and you cannot ignore that, but at least it should not be we should not be having to give up one for the other. We shouldn't have to give up our way of life, our language, our culture for technology. What we need to do is we need to merge it together. And find the balance. Use technology to protect our way of life. Use technology to document our way of life, our traditional practices.
And this is why I'm glad you're here on the ParBar, because now I have it videoed and recorded. So you had those steps. You had the now the Fafanaguis who are like the, and I've seen their ceremonies. I think they're great. I think their passion for culture is all pretty similar. It's not like one's up here and one's, I mean, they might have personal issues. I don't know, but cause I know
diversity is a spice of life. I always tell them that. Don't worry about being different. It's when we need to come together as a unit, then we come together as a unit.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing, because for me it's always about coming together. I think that's the one thing that I saw back on FS back in 2008 and 2000 was unity amongst the other islands, and that we were able to establish that too within ourselves. And that's why it resonated with me for so long. I sent back a couple of my dancers in 2016, and they came back and they just had this feeling like they wanted to go back home and they wanted to live this indigenous life. They just wanted to walk around in Saudis and didn't want to like work anymore. I'm like, I don't know, man. progression's going to happen with or without you. But you just have to, like you said, you have to merge it. You have to really merge it.
Balance.
Find the balance. And I think that's kind of where we are. I don't know.
We also have to understand that culture, in order for it to survive, has to continuously to evolve. That's culture, okay? If sometimes I come across headstrong, indigenous people that feel like, okay, we cannot, we need to continue doing what we did 50 years ago, okay?
Right.
And fine, let's continue doing what we did 50 years ago. We just need to understand that 50 years later, it's not the same.
Right.
Okay? So if you don't evolve what you used to do 50 years ago and let it find, culture is a vibrant culture, then it will continuously evolve.
Right.
And when you continuously evolve your culture, speak that language because it's not Chamorro. Okay? We still speak Chamorro to this day. I'm a fluent speaker. And yes, I understand that our language has incorporated some of the colonizers' influence, okay? But so did every culture,
Right.
okay? Every culture in the world has incorporated in their language, what came from outside. And it has continuously to evolve. So we just need to understand that and be acceptant, not be very extreme in one end of the
Spectrum.
spectrum versus the other, yeah.
Right. And I kind of agree with that. I definitely agree with that. There is, we as a Rencha have come out with these, people always say, oh, it's new, it's brand new, it's aggressive and it's different. And I say, well, yeah, I mean, because we have to compete with other dance groups that are out here in the States. I was like, but you understand, we know our basics.
Yeah.
Our basics are still established there. We just kind of flare it up to really compete with the city life, the United States.
Right.
And what you said, the Guma, and it's okay, language, singing.
Yes.
Now we're implementing weaving, which we have Rokin here, who's from Washington. We're implementing language a little bit more in depth.
Yeah.
But that's where the learning process comes.
Yes.
If I can't get the new students into my studio, I lose.
Right.
Right? So I need to be able to entertain
Right.
and educate.
Right.
And that's kind of like where we are, I guess, as far as Irencha is. But we have never lost focus of where our basics are and the main goals.
That's the important. And you have to look at everywhere in the world. Look, whether you look at the countries with very deep cultural heritage, Japan, China, Look at their presentation now. If you look at their presentation now and then you're going to look and compare it to what they used to do 40 years ago, very different.
Yeah.
Very
not the same.
different.
There's
Or
no-
even 100 years ago, very different.
Right.
Okay, and that's called the evolution. But they've maintained the basics and the standard and the foundation of who they are.
Standards,
And
yeah.
that's the main thing,
Yeah, and I love it. So moving on and kind of like closing out the show, we have like 15 minutes. So if anybody's out there want to ask questions for Uncle Frank, please add them, and I'll definitely post or ask him. But what I want to jump into, and this is probably the fun part, is all the critics. Right, because I mean, you can cuss on this show, Uncle Frank. You can, fuck you. You know, what I'm saying? You could definitely tell them. But the critics, the ones who say, you know what, that's wrong. Because I've gotten into a couple of those internet trolls, the flame boards, and they're just like, that's not, you're just trying to look Polynesian. You're trying to do this, and how do you deal with that? I mean, because you don't even have the internet, but you just hear about it.
Yes, I do. And first and foremost, my statement there is I don't quantify it with a response. And the second thing I say is that, for people to make comments like that, they have very little knowledge or are not educated about the history of the Chamorro people. And basically, they're just taking opinions from what they hear from others. And they're not really taking the time to verify those opinions.
Right.
So the comments that they dish out they have no value to me. At this point in time, because if they really knew their history, their Chamorro history, even 50% of their Chamorro history, then they would hesitate in making comments like that. That's why I don't quantify it with a response.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, you could just say, fuck you guys. You're a piece of shit. But Joaquin's asking one more question. He wanted to know if there's any place he could purchase Tautotano merchandise.
Tell him, say, you need to come back to Guam, Kin, and get back into Tautotano like you were before. You're a former member. You can always get your Tautotano. You don't have to buy it. You are a member. You've always been a member. So
yeah. And I got my sweater, Chelly. We're back at home. I got it in 2000. Still it hangs in there, and no one wears it, just me.
You're not a forgotten member.
I don't fit it though. I'm a little bigger.
Yeah. Your brother beat you to all his uniforms.
Nope. They're getting ready for the rosary here. So let me just go one more time. How do you the future of Chamorro dance after all is said and done? You kind of retire. What do you see? What are you hoping for the future of Chamorro dancing?
It's here now. It never existed 35 years ago. It's here now. So it's just up to the practitioners that exist now, for whatever age they are, to continue it, to continue this aspect that was once lost. If it does die this time around, it will not come back.
Yeah.
So it's up to the gumas that exist and the members within the gumas to continue it, and it's totally up to them. That's what I see in the future, because that's what culture is all about. It has to just continue to live.
Yeah.
It's only our fault if it dies. It's only our fault if our language dies. It's our fault. We cannot blame anybody. We cannot blame any disaster. We cannot blame.
I'm blaming Donald Trump. Just kidding.
We only have to blame ourselves.
Blame ourselves.
If any aspect of our identity disappears, we only have ourselves to blame, and that's it. So right now, the foundation of the Chamorro dance is very strong. I'm saying the roots is very deep now.
Right.
That it did not exist 35 years ago, but it's now very deep. It is a vibrant tree. I would say it's the ephit tree, okay? And the branches have already, and it's going to produce more seeds, and it's going to continue. It's only up to us if we kill it.
Yeah. Well, Uncle Frank, I want to thank you for coming joining us this weekend. Once again, it's the 65th Sons and Daughters unification celebration, and Uncle Frank's out of here from Guam. You'll be back here for CCF, hopefully.
Yes.
With
March.
GVB. Yeah, in March. And Joaquin, if you want to come and see Uncle Frank, he'll be here in March. So I don't know. I don't want to give you so many excuses.
He had his chance when I was in North Carolina in August.
Oh, jeez. You're not helping me, Joaquin. But I want to say thank you to Uncle Frank. I really appreciate you, and I love you a lot, and I'm so happy that you're here and really got me into Chamorro dancing with Rose and Auntie Heidi and Joelle. But big shout out to all the guys who came out here and viewed. We'll be here for the weekend. It's going to be Saturday. There's a concert from 5 to 10. It's the Legends concert. In about 30 minutes, I might have Jesse and Ruby on here. They're also from Guam, and they'll be singing a couple of songs and kind of talk about their history. And then Sunday, we have a big performance with Uncle Frank. Vince is also here. And JVR's here, and Rudy's here, so come out and join us. We're going to be here from 12 to 5. The performance in the opening is at 12 p.m.
Yeah, noon. Yeah,
12 p.m.
Yeah, 12 noon.
And we'll be doing a performance then, and we have a special guest that's going to be dancing in the middle. I don't know, I'd kick him in his head, but but thank you, Uncle Frank. I appreciate you.
No
and
problem.
we'll be back here in a couple minutes, 30 minutes or so. Estilators.
Okay. Shoot. Thank you, guys. Yeah, I wanted to say his nickname, but I didn't want to do it. Okay. That's Deuceberg.
Deuceberg. How do you stop it?
Oh, yeah, I'll type it to him.